Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tokyo Table Talk.
This is our inaugural episode. Woo-hoo.
Number 1.
Tokyo Table Talk is a podcast that we are going to be doing every week, where we'll talk about things that are related to D&D, both tangentially and directly. Mm-hmm. We'll be talking about things that have happened in our own campaign at Tokyo Tabletop, plus other topics that are relevant to the community. So let's start out with a quick introduction. My name is Vincent Pritchard. I am 29 years old. I'm a school teacher, and I play Atlas, the human bard, in Tokyo Tabletop. Mm-hmm. I've been doing tabletop role-playing games since I was in 6th grade.
I am DM Mike. You've probably seen me on camera if you've seen any of our campaign. I am 30 years old and a programmer here in Tokyo. I've been playing tabletop RPGs since AD&D. I've done a whole bunch of systems, a whole bunch of games, and currently a forever DM.
Mike has been just a beast putting this thing together. It's insane.
It's been fun, but that's part of the job of the DM, is to have fun. But that brings up a very interesting question. What is fun? What makes a D&D campaign enjoyable?
And that's what we're going to talk about on this first episode. So let's start off by talking a little bit about why our current campaign is fun for each of us. Like me as a player, you as the GM. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Why what we're doing right now is enough for us to continue doing it for 9-10 months.
Mm-hmm. I think the first point that you know a campaign is going well is that it is the end of the night. You've been playing for 4 or 5 hours. The drinks are gone. The food is gone. And you're still hanging around afterwards. You're still sitting around. You're regaling tales that just happened. Hearing different opinions, hearing what you wanted to do, what you could have done.
The wild speculation on things that could possibly have happened.
Yeah. You know you're on the right track when that happens.
Oh, yeah. And that still happens, like, every week, even now.
Every week.
Like, we end our broadcasts at the 4.5 hour mark or so. And then we end up just hanging around and eating food and talking about the things that have happened for another 2-3 hours at least.
At least.
And, like, you can definitely tell that the players are having a good time when they start to, like, forget about things that are outside the game. Like, when for instance, recently we had an instance where there was a big monster fight and it was killing all of our players. Mm-hmm. And the priest in our campaign, Ezrith, had this contract that had been given to her from a devil. It was in her pocket and she hadn't signed it. Everything was going poorly, and, like, she pulled the contract out and she goes, "I'm gonna sign the thing." And everyone at the table was like, "No, you can't sign the thing. Think about what will happen to Ezrith. Mm-hmm. Think about..." And like, it was like a really high tension, like everyone was really invested in the decision that she had made with it. And I think that's really cool, because, like, it really shows that the people are getting into the characters, into the game, into the world that surrounds them, and not just like, "Oh, you're signing the thing, I wonder what magic you'll get."
Right. When players are invested in the characters so much that they actually think about this imaginary character in my mind, what is going to happen to them if I sign this piece of paper. And that is where the fun is behind the screen. Is seeing players that involved in the world that they are really thinking about the consequences of their actions. That is the rewarding bit. That is the fun part.
Oh, definitely. Well, and, like, even I as a player, I'm playing a bard, so of course I'm playing a bard. But it gives me the opportunity to look at situations from a standpoint that I, as a human, don't normally get to. Mm-hmm. But Atlas can look at a situation and be like, well, this is something that Atlas would do. Mm-hmm. And that gives... I mean, that's the whole reason that people roleplay in the first place, is to give them the opportunities to experience situations and circumstances that they wouldn't in their normal lives. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that is one of the, like, biggest factors that makes something like this fun, is to be able to have those experiences and not have them directly impact your real life. Right.
So you bring up these experiences and these choices you have to make with Atlas. What's one choice that has stuck with you?
Oh, man. Just recently, for instance, we had met this gentleman, a kobold by the name of Girls Like the Magnificent, in like a wizard tower, and we took pity on him and didn't murderate his face, and we let him go. And then we ran into him like in world like months later in game like 2 weeks or something later. And he'd like amassed this group of kobolds in the forest, and he was trying to like rule over them like a king. And he needed our help to get rid of the beast of the forest that was, like, oppressing them and all that. And so we, having interacted with him before, were like, yeah, Girlslick is cool, right? I guess. So we went out and we did this thing, and we met that there was a Minotaur living in the forest. And so we killed him because, he threw magic at us.
D&D party.
Yeah. Hey, listen, okay? I wasn't the one that threw a rock directly at its invisible face. That wasn't me. He started it from Atlas's perspective.
Atlas sure as hell finished it.
Well, so the fight went on, and we killed the main one, and we went into the cave, where we found, like, a pregnant female Minotaur that was definitely this thing's mate. And everyone was, like, talking and sitting around and simpering about, like, well, what do we do with it? And so Atlas and his sort of, like, fey temperament got bored, waiting for everyone to make a decision, and so he did it himself by shot to the head executing this magically asleep pregnant Minotaur.
Yeah.
And in doing so, that has caused a lot of problems for our party.
Yeah.
Alice doesn't regret it. Like, it caused a schism within the party when the druid found out what had actually happened and all that. It caused, we now have a 12th of a party member, and that we have to carry around this baby Minotaur because no one else will just let it go somewhere. And I mean, like, obviously, it's a baby, you can't just leave it somewhere. It's a Minotaur! What am I gonna do with a Minotaur? What are you gonna do with a Minotaur? But we're still carting this thing around. Yeah.
So that was a choice that your character made.
Yeah.
That to execute this asleep pregnant Minotaur.
Oh yeah.
And now the party's been dealing with those choices.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is this comes up week after week, carrying this child around, and it has been a bullet point in every session so far.
Oh yeah.
That what are we doing with this baby? What are we going to carry? Like, who's carrying it? How are we going to care for it?
Right. Like, it's a main thing that we have to deal with now. Yeah. It's like a permanent modifier on the party.
Yeah.
And the fact that the choices that you make actually make a difference to the world that you're in is really important. Because there are a lot of campaigns that it's like, okay, well, there's the wizard's tower is at the end of this town, and they all don't want you to go kill the wizard. So they stomp into the town, and they kill a bunch of people, and then walk up to the... And then, like, there's no repercussions for having killed a bunch of townsfolk. But in the world that you, DM Mike, have put together for us, everything's got its consequences. Everything's got, like, a really deep reason behind it, and, like, if we do something, it definitely comes back later. Like, even just last session, the very first time that I, as Vincent, sat with Atlas the Bard at the table, he interacted briefly with a gentleman, where a hellhound showed up in his shop. So he dove in and, like, tried to help the guy and let him not get killed or whatever. 7 character levels later. We showed
9
back up.
months in real life time,
We showed back up at that town, and this guy was like, you're not going to find a place to stay, but you in the fancy hat, you did me right once. I'll take care of you. And Atlas, who has just recently been resurrected, was like, sorry, I don't know who you are, but thank you. So we ended up going out and hanging out with this guy, and it turns out that is the guy that Atlas saved in the shop months ago. Everything has, like, this butterfly effect to it, and you don't get that with a lot of GMs. So, like, I'm really enjoying this one because it all has consequences.
So is that where the core fun comes from, is those consequences?
Yeah, I think, like, being someone who tells stories myself, someone who's written stories and things like that before, seeing something that happened, 100 pages ago in a book suddenly have meaning again is really cool. It's really important. And for that sort of thing to happen in a world that, like, I'm actually experiencing things that I can live in, makes it so much stronger of an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said before, if it doesn't have, like, oh, you killed the goblins, now everything is fine or whatever,
Right.
and then later on there's just more goblins or whatever, that's just boring. But for the world to be alive around me, I think is where the fun comes from there. And I think that you've done just like a fantastic job of making sure that the world that we are playing in is as alive as it is.
It's a balancing game, absolutely. That is what's fun for Vincent. That Atlas can interact with the world and feel those repercussions down the line. But when I look at other players at the table,
Dragor
and Kim, actually, both of them, that when given choice, they're not too sure how to act.
Right.
And those are two players that definitely jive better with a more straightforward experience.
Definitely.
But at the end of the day, they're still having fun.
Oh, yeah. Well, and like that's the delicate balance that you as a GM have to put together as well, is like, what do I do to make sure that everyone at the table has a thing?
Right.
And that everyone at the table has an experience that makes it worth having come to the table this week. And that's what I think a lot of like early and beginning GMs have problems with. There's always the question of like, oh, well, what would you have wanted as a beginner GM? Like, what resources would you want?
Right.
And everyone is like, oh, well, maybe like some published material on how to be a GM or something like that. But I think really what it is time and effort. If you're gonna be a GM, you really have to look at the characters that you've got, look at the players behind those faces, and you have to like tailor the situation such that they will have fun.
Yes.
And that's not to say like you have to tailor the adventure to their characters. You have to tailor the experience at the table to the players.
There's never one size fits all. You're going to have active players, you're going to have the inactive players. Atlas, Veta, and even Corey are more active players. Whereas the other three, Dragor, Ezrith, and then Hasid, they are the more inactive players. And a lot of times what you can find is if you give the active players enough, they will find things to do enough so that the inactive players will be able to come along.
Definitely.
That it's more that the active players will start a fire and the inactive players will
have to put it out. Yeah, I mean, and I've noticed that, like, last session, for instance, we didn't have any combat.
Right.
There was no combat in that one. There was threats of combat.
There was some serious threats of combat. There was are you sure you want to do this combat?
Yeah, I mean, when you try to knife a dragon in the back and it doesn't work, then you go,
it doesn't hit on the 21.
Yeah. It's like there's something there. So even with no combat, Atlas is fine. But I feel like without some dice rolling, without some mechanic crunching, some players might get lost.
Yeah, definitely.
At our table, I think everyone is well-rounded enough to stay interested, but I definitely think that without the kind of thing that, for instance, Dragor, the half-orc barbarian with a magic weapon that eats other magic weapons, can really sink his teeth into, he will fade into the background for that session.
Yes.
You really have to look at what your players want. Because at the end of the day, you're the GM, you run the world, you're God and everything. But it is what you do that gives the other players the ability to have fun.
Right. Ideally, you should try to, when planning out a session, have a piece of spotlight for each character.
Oh, yeah.
It's absolutely not possible every time, especially when you will plan, okay, this is clearly a spot for Dragor, but then Atlas actually solves the problem before Dragor can even act. That does happen. And you want to try to see, I have all these different players, what do they like, what are their abilities, what are their play styles, how can I appeal to each one of them in every session so that they leave and they leave the table with a memory, with a, hey, I did a really cool thing. I helped the party, I helped this NPC, I progressed the story. I got an item, I killed a goblin. Something that they can take away every week.
Yeah.
And that's not always possible, but that should be your goal. And if you don't find that rewarding, if that is not If you sit down as a DM and you are looking at it, well, how can I kill the party this week? You may want to try sitting on the other side of the screen.
I mean, there are games that are for that. Dungeons and Dragons is not a DM versus player
No, it is
game.
not. It is not.
But if you want that, there are plenty of other tabletop role-playing games out there that are fine for, like, okay, I'm the GM, I'm the game master, and it's my job to kill the people at my table. And if they can defeat all the stuff that I throw, then they win.
Right.
But with D&D, there isn't really a win-lose.
There's not. I mean, you can argue that a TPK would be a lose, but I have seen so many parties, like a Phoenix Rise Above, that the main party wipes, and now they play the NPCs. And
like, I really like the idea of the main party not always winning.
Yeah.
Because that's like a really, it's a stereotype, it's a trope that we've gone through so many times in fantasy literature and the kind of stories that we'd be telling in Dungeons & Dragons. You know, the players get their magic sword, and they go in, and then they fight the things, and then they save the princess, the end.
Right.
But that's boring. We've seen that 100 times now. And like in the world that we're living in right now, we thought that we were doing good things sometimes. They turned out to be pretty bad.
Yeah.
Having a flaw to the main characters is probably the most important part of the writing of a story. But giving the players the ability to have flaws is, I think, what makes a good GM. Because, like, you know, you can sit at the other side of the table and be like, all right, I've got a fighter. He'll be good at killing these guys. I've got a rogue. He will pick this lock.
Right.
I've got a etc. etc. And, like, that's great because you're utilizing their characters or whatever and all that. But, like, all that you're doing is you're setting up mechanics for their mechanics to knock down.
Right.
It's a role-playing game.
Right.
It's not a mechanics balance game.
There was a post on Reddit. A player in his campaign had a clever way to defeat a Medusa. And came up with this plan to create essentially a mirror shield. Even though there was some resistance from the DM, checks were made, they were passed, and this player goes equipped with a mirror shield. And then during the Medusa fight, the Medusa never looks at the player, but still makes swings towards the player. And it's just so obvious. And then after a while, the Medusa just shatters the shield.
Yeah, that's salty DM syndrome.
Well, the player asked the DM, what the hell? That was meta of the DM. And the DM's response was, I'm tired of losing every week.
Yeah, that's salty DM syndrome, like nobody's business.
Right.
That's not the way to approach the game.
It's not. But I think with that is, I think there is maybe some old school thought into that, where when you were running Tome of Horrors, that is DM versus players. There's some old school thought out there that you are up against monsters, you are up against the DM. The DM is trying to kill the players.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely a play style. And that is the whole point of today's talk, is that could be fun in the right setting.
Right. But you have to set that up beforehand.
Right.
There's the difference, I think. A lot of like new games will start up and it'll be like, you know, all right, we've got 4 players and a GM. We're going to sit at this table. You guys make your characters.
Right.
Cool. I'm going to murder them.
Right.
And if you tell them beforehand, like, you're making characters specifically to try to get through all the challenges that I'm going to throw at you. If you die, that's your fault. Then that's okay. But if it's like, all right, make characters, have these cool backstories, get invested in them, do sketches or whatever, and then have them die in the first couple rooms, that's salty. That evokes the kind of response that you don't really want from your players, that you don't want from your GM, and everyone goes home having not had a good time.
Right. Misaligned expectations.
Communicate first.
Absolutely.
Session 0 is the most important session of your game.
It's a session that most skip, that most don't even understand what an actual Session 0 is. And actually, you missed the official Session 0.
I did.
You joined, I believe, one game after we started. The players in this current campaign, we were friends before we started.
Right.
But we actually met in a real-life tavern. Yeah, we went to a hub.
That's awesome.
We got a couple of drinks, and we sat down, and I had some overview of the campaign, and I made very clear what the expectations were going into this. This is an evolving world that you're going to be a part of. There is an overarching storyline should you choose to follow it, and your actions are your own. That is the campaign. Now, let me hear from you guys. What characters do you want to play?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the crucial part that gets missed out a lot, is as much information as you're giving, you need to ask as many questions from your players.
At least, yeah.
At least. What are you getting out of this? I had one campaign that I was trying to get off the ground. There was a lot of intrigue, a lot of talk first, combat third, after we've exhausted all options. And one of the potential players is asking what they get out of the campaign, and they were the murder hobo. Kill, loot. And whenever we would try to I'd ask other players, I'd go to the next player, tell me about a memorable experience, and he would talk about a fight that he had with a bodak. And then immediately that first player would be, I killed 4 of them, and is like, oof.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the session 0, and we are not lining up.
Mm-hmm.
And you gotta nip that in the bud right away and say, we are looking for different things.
Yeah.
You're looking for a kick down the door dungeon crawl, and that is fun. That is absolutely a way to play. That is a way that we did a session of those, and
oh man,
and it was enjoyable to not have to worry about overarching plots. To just we kicked open a door. What's in this room? Let's figure it out. Next room.
Right. And because I as a person like to play the bard type characters. I like to play the ones that solve problems. But going into that one, I was like, all right, we're rolling a half-orc paladin. I've not been a big smashy guy in a very long time. But for instance, for someone who's coming into an already existing campaign, like I did, or like him and Matt did, like
even
everyone
Megan and
did.
Jason,
literally everyone at the
and
table
Laura,
that's
actually,
right now, nobody at the table is the original party.
That's right. That's correct.
I'm the oldest one at the party, and I wasn't even the original one.
Yeah.
The original party for whom all of this stuff had been written is gone.
So that's an interesting point, is what happens, and this is, life gets in the way, especially being an expat here in Japan. You learn very quickly that your friends will come and go.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to deal with this. Players being here 1 week, and then maybe they miss a session, they miss 2, miss 3, and then they just stop showing up.
Right.
So how do you deal with that revolving door of players when you already have an established campaign?
That's true. So I've actually, back when I was in college, when I was the Forever GM, I had a Pokemon RPG. Thanks to it being in college and people having exams and having to go home for a break and that kind of stuff, the idea that you would have the same people at the table every day was almost unthinkable. And to deal with that, you have to implement like in-world meta mechanics that make it such that having new people interacting with your quest isn't a weird thing.
Yeah.
So like for that one, it was, well, you all just recently graduated from Pokemon College. And so you have your Pokemon trainer's license, and you get to go and like join the Pokemon Rangers or Team Rocket if you're that one girl. So there were all these different organizations that had ties with the party. So like when the kid who was the Pokemon Ranger had to leave, it was because he got called away to do something to help save the Pokemon in the environment nearby or something like that, and would come back later. When the Team Rocket girl had to leave, it was because she decided that she needed to like steal some Pokemon from the Pokemon Center nearby or something like that. So having easy ins and outs for players is really important when you know that you're going to have a group that doesn't last in its current iteration for long.
Right.
For us, in this campaign, we've got the main character curse.
Yes. When players are not present, they turn into a wooden idol. Poof, and now they're a wooden idol. Now someone actually needs to carry that idol. Damage comes to that idol, then that actually transfers to the character.
Right.
So you have to leave your character in the care of someone who's trustworthy.
Ha ha ha, trustworthy in a party like this one. Ha ha ha.
One of the things I am against is having the DM control PCs.
Ugh.
I do not agree with that at all. I'm not even a big fan of having NPCs follow the party, because it is the player's game. The DM sets the world, sets the backdrop, but it is the players who must interact with everything. They must make the choices. What I feel is just a sin as a DM to play a character's character.
Oh yeah.
That will not. I won't do that. So that's why you turn into an idol. Other ideas I've seen is kind of a hub world where everybody has a stone, and they can return to a castle, fort, a mansion, somewhere where they can call home. You sit down with your players ahead of time and say, you can only use this out of game. This is just a mechanic to remove your characters from the party when they don't show up.
The Hearthstone.
The Hearthstone, right. So you have to be very, very clear if you're going to use a mechanic like that. As soon as the chips are down and the players need a way to escape, they're going to be reaching for those Hearthstones. They're going to be trying to use all those escape methods. But to use it simply as a mechanic, so you don't need to be a DM who controls a player, that's my recommendation. I know Critical Role, Mercer plays the other characters more as in the background.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, I just don't agree with that.
Having a DM PC is, to me, I know a lot of people will do this, and this is probably going to be an unpopular opinion, but having a DM play a character at the table is the kind of thing where the DM wants to play as a player but is stuck being the DM, so he gives himself a character to play at the table as well. But the problem is you can't not be meta with that.
You can't, no matter how hard you try. Even with normal NPCs, it's very difficult to have all these characters in your mind and to be able to jump in and out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And to also be playing a character that travels with the PCs, adventures with them, fights with them. That's a very, very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, and I mean, you really have to, partition out each character in your head, too.
Yeah.
Because if you're not thinking to yourself, okay, I, as a GM, know that there's all these secrets that you could stumble across and that kind of thing.
Right.
And I, as a GM, want my players to do those things because they're super awesome and I put a lot of work into them. Oh no, the players are leaving that area. I guess I'll have my ranger discover the secret. That happens too much.
And that's back to the main topic here is that detracts from the fun. Is now that reveal, that reward was almost stolen from the party.
Yeah, I mean, it's sullied, it's made dirty. Yeah, you still get the loot from behind it, but it's not your loot.
You didn't get it. Right. That the DM PC got it for you.
Well, let's continue our discussion in a second, but first we've got an internal sponsor who would like to give you a message. Let's talk about our active combat system, XeTeX. DM Mike?
In our game, we're not using the standard round-robin combat. We are using an active combat system we called XeTeX that, depending on what you do, is going to move you in the initiative order. You never know who's going to be next. You never know what's going to happen in combat, as the order is always changing, and it depends on what you do. For example, if you move one square, that's going to take less time than casting a spell, and that's going to change where you go in the initiative order.
It's a fantastic system that we've been using for quite a while now. And so now we've got this thing available to the public. You can go and check it out at www.axe.tax. So yeah, you can go check it out there. It is free to use for everybody.
Yep.
And if you want to help support the development of it and get some cool extra features on the way, there's a Patreon link that is there as well. If you feel like your table needs a little bit of spice in its combat, if you feel like maybe your players aren't paying enough attention during the fights, if you feel like you just need that little extra something to make your combats that much more fun, bring your table around and pay the axe tax. Now that we're back, let's talk about our next topic. Let's talk some personal experiences at the table. We've already gone through a couple of these earlier, but I kind of feel like these are a lot of fun to just talk about and listen to.
Yeah.
So, Mike.
Yes.
What in the campaign that we've got right now is something that you totally thought we were going to do and then we didn't?
There was a while back when the party they were tasked with finding an angel. After some investigation, they learned that this angel was sold by this member of a thieves guild, that he came into contact with this angel and kind of abducted him. And to break it down very quickly, they had to go into the thieves guild and find this guy's ledger. And there was a contract in there that was going to give them clues to the next step. I had laid out a fairly straightforward, just about like a 5-6 room dungeon And the gimmick was, in this Thieves Guild, you cannot give out your real name. They don't use names. Everybody that they have run into has a title, a code name.
The gentleman that we were talking to was called The Happening.
The Happening. And that is how they introduced themselves. That is how they presented themselves. They went through the starting puzzle, a tile puzzle, and they actually had a map for this place, which The Happening is dyslexic, so the map was flipped. And they figured that out very quickly. Progressed through the opening puzzle, no problem. The alert has not been raised. I figured that you would either screw up the puzzle, you would go in guns a-blazing, or you would do it all stealthy. Mm-hmm. And you guys chose the stealth route. Right. And thus far, phenomenal. You're doing great.
Yeah.
You walk into the first room, you get to the chest you need.
Yeah.
You open it up, you get the ledger, you get the contract, and you even conned a guy, one of the Thieves Members Guild, into opening a chest, and you even got some bonus loot.
Yeah.
You were done.
We were so finished there.
But you looked at the map that you had drawn, and you looked at how much you explored, and you saw, well, there's 5 more rooms in this place.
Yep.
And I'm thinking in my head, they came in, they are on a time-sensitive mission, they need to recover this angel, they got the contract, we're good. They then proceed to systematically go room by room, looking for everything they can that's not nailed down. And it's not until they get into the bar that things really went south.
No.
When our sorcerer,
our dear sorcerer,
throws open the door to this bar, announcing his presence with fireworks. Bartender looks up and asks, "What's your name?" To which our sorcerer says, "What, me? I'm Corey. No, I mean Dragontooth. You..." And now that wasn't even the worst part, because that made for a great story. They came in, they failed the stealth route. Now they start blowing things up. They set a couple of guys on fire. They loot a few more rooms, and now they're back on track. On their way out, there's 2 remaining members of this guild, and they're sitting back watching the party, and one of the thieves actually approaches the party, and she says, "We have eyes and ears everywhere." And now I'm thinking in my head, there are 2 witnesses. One of them specifically walks up to the party and calls them out and says, "Hey, we saw everything that you guys did. We know your faces." And now I'm thinking, we're going to roll initiative one more time.
Mm-hmm.
And the party walks out the door.
Yeah, we left those 2 alive.
It was, looking at the notes that I had prepared, they always manage to find the third option that isn't written down. Because I figured stealth and it's going to be good, or it's alert time, we got to clean house.
Guns the whole time.
And they gunsed halfway. So now I got to look at my notes and I got to review everything and say, okay, of all the times that they have encountered this Thieves Guild and people from this Thieves Guild, now I need to update all those NPCs with this new information.
Literally everything is going bad because of that.
Yeah.
Had we just cleaned that house,
mm-hmm.
or, gone in and taken the thing and left like we had intended to in the first place, we wouldn't be in, 85% of the trouble that we're in right now.
Yeah.
But now, instead, that Thieves Guild has got a 15,000 gold bounty on our party.
Mm-hmm.
Our main mystic ally is missing because of them.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be, really careful to not be killed in our sleep.
Mm-hmm.
We've had an ambush done on us once already.
Yeah, I had option A and option B planned, and they chose option C, which then had this ripple effect on the entire campaign.
Oh, yeah.
It's those main choices that the party makes that you have to actually go back through all your notes and see,
change everything.
I got to change everything. And what you just found out is someone you thought you were allied with, Wine and Sarah.
Wine, who is Atlas is the only one who even knows a little bit about him.
Yeah.
Because everyone else in the party came afterwards, and Atlas didn't really think he was allied with him so much as just not on his bad side.
Right.
But Wine is the master of the Thieves Guild in the city of Sara, the big city that we all started in.
So now I got to go back to day 1 and look at this. Well, what was the interaction with this NPC? What did this What did the party do with this guy? Knowing this new information, how is that going to change the dynamics of this city?
Mm-hmm.
And it's been interesting, but that is part of it. If you are willing to put in that little bit of effort to make that world change, you have these moments where we can sit back and look at this. And when the party gets back to the starting city and everything has changed, and they start putting the pieces together
so radically too.
They start putting the pieces together, and they start coming to that realization of, wow, we actually caused all of this.
There's a lot of trouble we caused. Lot of trouble.
It's fun for the players. It's fun for the DM, and if you can achieve that, you're doing something right.
Most definitely. Oh man, like I keep thinking about, like, it's Tuesday when we're recording this right now.
Yeah.
And Sunday is when we get to play again.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm looking at the clock, like, okay, how long until it's Wednesday? So that I can then think about how long it is till it's Thursday. And, like, you know that when your players are chomping at the bit to keep playing?
Yeah.
That your table is a good table. And in the end, I think Tokyo Tabletop is a pretty good series of stories tied together with the characters.
It's been a lot of fun so far. It's been a whole lot of fun to run. It's been a lot of fun to record and to see ourselves and to see the interaction from the community.
Mm-hmm. To grow as much as we have as well.
Yeah.
So, and of course, this is just going to be an offshoot of that, where we're going to talk about the things that have happened at the table, why things are the way that they are.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about other sorts of topics related to tangential to and parallel to tabletop role-playing games and that sort of stuff. We're going to see if we can't bring on a couple other people sometimes to have their input as well.
Right.
So I hope that you guys have enjoyed the first episode of Tokyo Table Talk. Stars willing, we'll be able to put one of these up every week.
We're going to shoot for a weekly. We have a lot to talk about. We have a lot of topics to cover. We both would like to give our input on the standard topics of addition wars and feats and spells and character classes.
And how Rangers are garbage in 5th edition, cough.
Rangers are pretty trash. I would rather play a Ranger than a Psionic, though.
Yeah, because
I think that's a given.
I think maybe that'll be our episode 2. We'll talk about why Psionics are dumb. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys very much for coming and joining us. You can find this podcast wherever you found it before. Mm-hmm. Continue doing that. If you're watching it or listening to it on YouTube, there's also the like and subscribe buttons and all that other things. If we've managed to pull it off, maybe you can give us a good review on iTunes so that people will be more easily able to find us.
Yes, the more reviews, the more you can be found. It's got that classic catch-22.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you guys very much again for coming and listening, and we hope that we will see you around again next episode.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next week.
Woo-woo.